In 1916, 60-year-old General Pétain, long passed over for promotion, was entrusted with one of World War I's most horrific battles, a conflict that would leave an indelible mark on France. The Battle of Verdun, later nicknamed the Meat Grinder, was the first modern battle where one side's goal was simply to inflict the maximum number of casualties on the enemy. Amidst the chaos and slaughter, Pétain thrived. A career officer who had never fired a shot in anger, he faced his first true war only a year before retirement. Known for his unconventional thinking, he had long argued for strong defensive positions supported by artillery, while much of the French army championed offensive tactics and the concept of élan, the fighting spirit of the bayonet. The prevailing belief was that victory required aggression and that the bayonet was the primary weapon, outranking rifles, machine guns, or artillery. Pétain disagreed. Practical and realistic, he warned that courage alone could not withstand automatic weapons and heavy artillery. For this, he was branded a heretic. In 1914, however, the disastrous events that triggered World War I vindicated him, and France learned that defense was as vital as offense. In February 1916, German forces struck Verdun with a savage surprise attack. Thousands of French soldiers died within days, and the city was on the verge of falling. The High Command ordered Pétain to hold Verdun at all costs. Pétain went straight to the front lines, something few generals would do. There, he implemented innovative strategies that would make him a national hero. He introduced a rotation system to give exhausted soldiers rest, reorganized supply lines, and repositioned artillery. These measures saved countless lives and strengthened France's defense. Unlike many generals, Pétain understood the daily suffering of soldiers in the trenches. He believed that after 8 to 10 days of combat, a division needed to be rotated out of the line to recover. His concern for the troops made him immensely popular, and soon he became the most respected general among the average French soldier. Young officer Charles de Gaulle requested to join his staff, becoming Pétain's protégé and beginning a lifelong association. While loved by soldiers, Pétain faced resistance from his superiors. Although he defended Verdun successfully, he opposed a counterattack and was reassigned to a desk job. General Robert Nivelle, who showed little regard for troop casualties, replaced him. Verdun dragged on for 10 brutal months, leaving nearly 1 million dead before ending in December 1916. It became one of history's longest and bloodiest battles, with massive casualties and unimaginable suffering. Officially, France emerged victorious, seemingly proving the value of élan. From headquarters, Pétain could not prevent Nivelle from launching another offensive further north in April 1917, which ended in disaster. French troops faced freezing rain, snow, and heavily fortified German defenses, suffering massive losses. By May, nearly the entire army had mutinied, not violently, but by refusing to leave the trenches and charge to almost certain death. At this critical moment, France had to choose between ruin and reason, and Pétain was called back. Europe teetered on chaos. German mutinies threatened collapse, and Russian unrest sparked revolution and communist takeover. Yet Pétain managed the French mutiny peacefully. Unlike other generals, he did not order executions. He personally met the soldiers, improved food, extended leave, and earned their loyalty. Climbing onto his car, he addressed them with empathy, acknowledging their suffering while reminding them that the enemy still occupied French soil. He promised not to ask the impossible and ended with his famous words, "We will wait for the Americans and we will wait for the tanks." Pétain's pledge restored hope. Reinforcements and new weapons, including tanks, eventually arrived, enabling France and Britain to defeat Germany in 1918. But the cost was staggering. France lost 1.5 million soldiers, with another 1.5 to 2 million maimed. Cities lay in ruins, and the land was scarred by shellfire. While much of the destruction was rebuilt, the moral and psychological wounds remained, and many French believed they could never endure another war of such magnitude. Before the war, Pétain's defensive vision had been dismissed. Afterward, he was hailed as a prophet. In the 1920s, France built the Maginot Line, a massive chain of forts along the German border, following his strategy. Though France was weakened, Pétain's influence grew. He was named Marshal of France, the nation's highest military honor, served on top government committees, represented France abroad, and briefly became Minister of War. Political and public support surged, and campaigns promoted him as a potential head of state, a role he embraced. After the war, a generation of Frenchmen returned to civilian life with an almost heroic view of Pétain, seeing him as the man who had saved them from the horrors of battle and the trenches. This enduring image would play a crucial role in shaping France's future 20 years later. France called those 2 decades the Hollow Years. Recovery from the First World War was agonizingly slow, leaving its people demoralized and uncertain. The nation wavered politically, swinging between socialists and communists on one side and a rising, homegrown fascist movement on the other. Governments rose and fell with dizzying speed. Strikes erupted, and riots filled the streets. By this time, Marshal Pétain, once a revered elder statesman, had lost faith in elected officials, while his fear of a descending chaos gripped the nation. And indeed, chaos was already at France's doorstep. Across Europe, fascism was rising in Italy, communism had taken hold in Russia, and Nazism, after 1933, had begun to spread across Germany. France became a magnet for refugees, hundreds of thousands seeking safety within its borders, the largest foreign population in Europe, many of them Jewish. In 1939, the man responsible for many of these refugees, Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland, igniting World War II. The Poles he did not massacre, he enslaved. He stripped Poland of its resources, filled it with concentration camps, and reshaped the nation to serve Germany's ambitions. The following year, his attention turned toward France, which believed itself safe behind the Maginot Line. On May 10th, German tanks and fighter planes tore through the French countryside, bypassing the supposedly impregnable defenses. In 6 short weeks, they reached the Atlantic coast. The French fought fiercely, but they were unprepared and disorganized. 110,000 soldiers died, countless others were wounded, and nearly 2 million were captured. France faced a grim choice: continue fighting despite catastrophic losses or surrender. The government had plans to evacuate to North Africa, where France's colonial forces were strong. Much of the navy was already positioned there, and about 1,000 French planes flew overseas. The army, and even ordinary citizens, could have waged guerrilla warfare. The choices were stark, but the government was paralyzed. The nation needed a unifying figure. That figure was found in 84-year-old Marshal Pétain, the last surviving hero of World War I. Pétain accepted the role of deputy prime minister. He was trusted to unite the fractured nation, bridging left and right, young and old, and to guide France through either continued war or a negotiated peace. Meanwhile, over 100,000 French troops had already escaped to Britain alongside their allies. Winston Churchill, Britain's new prime minister, urged the French to keep fighting, painting a heroic vision of relentless resistance. But Pétain saw it differently. Churchill was a new politician, full of rhetoric, speaking of bitter-end battles while withdrawing his own forces. Pétain's skepticism swayed the cabinet. The prime minister resigned, and Pétain assumed full leadership. On June 17th, he addressed the nation over the radio. "With a heavy heart, I tell you today that it is necessary to stop the fighting." The announcement did not spark celebrations. The French new occupation was inevitable, yet there was relief. Soldiers would no longer die needlessly, and France could survive. Hitler, for his part, offered France something no other defeated nation received: an armistice. For Germany, it freed troops for conquest. For France, it promised survival. But Hitler added insult to injury. The armistice was to be signed in the very railroad car where Germany had surrendered to France in World War I. Pétain and much of the public accepted this humiliation, believing it tolerable. Many shared Pétain's conviction that France was fighting the wrong war, one that served England, Poland, or the Jews, not France itself. Why continue, they reasoned, when a treaty could end the war? Losses might include a province or two, but survival was ensured. Not all agreed. Charles de Gaulle, condemned by Pétain as a traitor, fled to Britain to continue the fight from abroad. Germany then split France. Paris and the north fell under occupation, while Pétain and the remnants of the parliament retreated to Vichy, transforming the resort town into the seat of his authority. The pre-war parliament dissolved itself at his demand, granting Pétain near absolute power. France trusted him. Citizens, still reeling from military defeat, saw the armistice as necessary, if not wise. Pétain, however, went further. France's loss was military, the result of disastrous planning against a brilliant German strategy. Yet instead of blaming the army, he blamed a 150-year-old event, the French Revolution, which had replaced kings with elected officials. Democracy was the disease, and Pétain had the cure. He argued that the revolution had been a wrong turn, and France needed a father figure to guide citizens who knew their place, fulfilled their duties, and obeyed authority. He replaced liberty, equality, and fraternity with work, family, and homeland, discipline instead of liberty, hierarchy instead of equality, and authority instead of fraternity. Pétain embraced fascism. Viewed today, it is abhorrent, but at the time it resonated with many, tapping into existing right-wing traditions. He proclaimed a national revolution and began remaking France in his vision, establishing a regime built on obedience, hierarchy, and authority. Pétain was not free to act entirely as he wished. He needed Germany's help or, at minimum, its permission. The Vichy French government repeatedly appealed to the Germans, "Let us work together. Give us better conditions and we will collaborate with you." From Pétain's perspective, this was realism. The Germans seemed unstoppable. If they could defeat France, who else could resist them? Recognizing this, Pétain believed prudence demanded acceptance, allowing France as a nation to move forward. In October 1940, Pétain met Hitler for the first and only time. Initially, he hoped to leverage their shared experience in World War I, though he did not hold Hitler in high regard personally. His aim was to create a connection that might smooth France's path. Hitler rejected this outright. Having served as a foot soldier, he despised the French, viewing them as decadent and corrupt, and he had not forgiven them for their World War I victory. To Hitler, collaboration meant exploiting France's economy for Germany's war effort. After the meeting, Pétain announced over the radio, "I enter into the way of collaboration." Under Vichy, the word took on a sinister meaning. While Nazi policies laid the groundwork for the final solution, Vichy revealed a particularly French anti-Semitism. The government conducted a census and created card files listing every Jew in France, later used by the Germans in implementing the final solution. Laws in 1940 and 1941 banned Jews from professions, universities, and public service, effectively pushing them out of public life without immediate physical harm. By 1942, German pressure increased for Vichy to hand over Jews to Auschwitz. Vichy complied, but only with the caveat that French-born Jews were excluded. French authorities chose who would be deported. They would discriminate, but not hand over their own citizens. Ultimately, nearly 76,000 Jews were deported, with only around 2,000 surviving. Propaganda featuring Pétain's paternal image reassured the public, but rationing and forced labor bred resentment. One man noted, "Work, family, and homeland has given way to bother, hunger, and surveillance." The anger targeted Vichy, dominated by Nazi supporters, and many began to see Pétain as a figurehead. Pétain's authority waned as the war progressed, though he remained aware of all legislation. Germany demanded materials, prompting agreements to produce aircraft, trucks, and tanks, while French agriculture was largely sent to Germany, leaving the population hungry. France became one of the most important contributors to the Nazi war economy outside Germany. The obligatory work service sent nearly 700,000 French workers to German factories. Many fled to southern forests to avoid forced labor, joining the French resistance, known as the Maquis, reflecting their forest origins. Thousands disappeared into the woods, sabotaging German efforts and gathering intelligence, aiding Allied plans for the liberation of France. Pétain viewed the resistance as traitors, believing his authoritarian model could restore France without war. Resistance membership was never large, but Allied victories and news of de Gaulle's Free French gradually shifted public opinion. In 1942, Roosevelt attempted to recruit Pétain's cooperation as Allied forces prepared to land in North Africa. Pétain refused, raising questions about whether he truly supported France or served as a Nazi toady. On November 11, 1942, Germany occupied southern France, extinguishing its independence and formally turning Vichy into a puppet state. Despite opportunities to abandon his post, Pétain remained, believing he could save France through neutrality. On D-Day, June 1944, the Allies landed, and de Gaulle emerged as France's legitimate leader. Pétain, who had sentenced de Gaulle's allies to death, attempted a peaceful transfer of power, but his authority was no longer recognized. De Gaulle marched into liberated Paris while Pétain was arrested. Minor collaborators faced street justice. Pétain was tried for treason. He refused to testify, reading instead, "If I could not be your sword, I tried to be your shield. Day after day, a dagger at my throat, I struggled against German demands." His trial centered on his leadership, collaboration, and the illusion of an armistice with Hitler. Despite significant political and popular support during the occupation, the verdict reflected the moral judgment of history. Petain's defense framed France's 1940 defeat as inevitable and accommodation as pragmatic, claiming he had spared France from the fate of Poland. In reality, France was large and wealthy, and Germany intended to exploit it as a resource rather than annihilate it. Pétain transformed military defeat into a moral defeat and attempted to remake France as a semi-fascist state. His near success ended with Germany's collapse, which also doomed his national revolution. Sentenced to death, Pétain remained revered by some. To avoid unrest, de Gaulle commuted his sentence and exiled him to an island, echoing Napoleon's fate. Pétain remained imprisoned there until his death in 1951 at 95. Born in 1856 during France's Second Empire, he witnessed his nation's decline to a shadow of its former glory. A man of limited talent but immense pride, Pétain's power dragged the French into moral ruin. Many, through no choice of their own, became unwilling collaborators, producing tanks or enforcing Nazi policies, and living with the shame of their forced complicity in Vichy's collaboration and the final solution. Pétain's fear of chaos and disdain for democracy nearly destroyed France. A lifelong friend remarked that Pétain cared more about the French than France itself. Ultimately, he damaged his country and its people, leaving wounds that endured for decades.